Ta-da. Okay, so yeah, so I wanted to welcome everybody to our first Instrument Menagerie, and we have as our guest our APS harpist Sara Magill. Hi, David, who has very generously made our first video about the instrument, about her instrument, the harp, and I guess we can just start by, unless Sara wants to say a few introductory things, we can start with questions.
I mean, I'm just so happy that you guys are here and curious about the harp, and I love to answer questions. So if there's anything you want to know about, gosh, anything about the harp, just like ask away.
Okay. I have a quick question regarding difficulty of changing keys within a piece of the harp because of all the pedals and all the loud clickings and everything. Like say what you say. I mean, how long do you think is like a good? Does it take typically to change a key? Say if you're like in C major, you're gonna go into E flat or something like that. How like is it usually like you never change keys at all in a piece, or is there like a specific time like frame that you need? Because I assume there is.
Yeah. I mean,
Sara, excuse me one second. The person who's here on the phone is not muted. Actually, two people are not muted. Could you please mute so we don't hear other music in the background? Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Sara.
Thanks. Yeah, changing keys, it's so tricky to decide how quickly you can do this. It really depends on which notes in the new key are going to be different than the notes of the previous key. So like if I set C major, it means all of my pedals are in the middle. Now, if say the next measure you need me to play like a C major chord, and then you ask the harpist to play a C flat major chord immediately after that, it's impossible because we would have to move 3 pedals at a time. And you can only move 2 pedals at a time. So it's definitely possible to switch key signatures. It just depends on, gosh, I don't know, just how quickly the notes are running, if there are any rests in between. So that's something where if you're writing something and you're unsure about it, I would consult a harpist. They can look over it and tell you whether or not it's going to be workable. I'm sorry, I don't know if that helps.
No, it absolutely does. That pretty much that's what I wanted to know. Just for our compositions that we're writing now, and there's a harp part that key changes can be tricky, so I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and if you want to send it over to me, I'm happy to look at it because clearly I'm not going anywhere or doing anything else. So I'm happy to look at whatever you guys have going on right now for sure.
Somebody else?
Can you tell about the lowest strings? They don't have pedals, right?
Correct. So the lowest C, well, let me go over this first. So when you tune the harp, you actually tune the harp in C flat major because all of the pedals are at their highest level, which means that there is no extra tension on the string. So does anybody know how the pedals actually work with the gears on the top of the harp? Or does anyone want to know how that works? Okay, so when the note is all the way, let me see if I can do this. So up here, there are some gears. I wish I could get closer so you guys could see. But when you move a pedal down, one of these gears up here literally tightens the string so that you move up a half step. And then when you go all the way down, there's a second gear. So there are 2 gears for each string. The first one turns the note to natural, the second one turns the note to sharp. Now, when you ask about the lowest two strings, the C and the D, you're correct, they don't have those two gears to tighten the string each time. So if you're writing a piece, it's important to make sure that if you want a low C flat, it's important to know that you can't then have a low C natural and a very low C sharp during that piece. But you can, let's see, how do I describe this? If you are writing something and you know that you want a C flat, the harpist will tune this low C to C flat at the beginning of the piece. If they know there's going to be C natural, we'll tune it to C natural at the beginning of the piece, and the same goes for the low D string. So that's how that works. Any other questions?
Do you want to show us some of the extended techniques that you thought might be interesting for them to see and know about?
Sure. Yeah. So I wrote them all down, some of them down, because there are a million things you can do with this instrument. So the first thing, and I love this, it's very weird, what you can do is you can actually weave paper in and out of the strings to get a different texture. So you would just notate to the harpist to put paper in between whichever register of strings you want to use, and it gives a really interesting sound, and I don't know how this is going to sound for you guys. Can anyone hear that different texture? Okay, so that's one thing. That's in a lot of contemporary music. People like to do that. The second thing you can incorporate in writing for harp is we can actually use our nails. Now, I don't know if you guys know, usually we keep our nails super duper short so that we can use the flesh of our fingers to produce sound, but you can request using your nails. Sometimes there will be a gliss with your nails, which sounds different than a normal gliss. Just more kind of like plasticky sounding, just less resonant. And you can also request to play with the fingernail, which I don't know how this is going to sound because I don't really have any right now. How that works. Let's go.
Sarah?
Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
for each of these techniques, are there particular words, or does it just say put paper, use nails, etc.?
It's different every time. This is something that I would look up. I can send everybody a list of notation. There's very like specific ways of writing it, which you can find really online quite easily, just how to notate different techniques for harp. But sometimes it'll just say nails. So like for nails, sometimes they'll just write like draw a little half moon over top of it. But yeah, it's there are random there are ways to notate it in the music. Sometimes at the beginning of a piece, if there are numerous extended techniques, the composer can draw a symbol and then say the symbol means this, and then put the symbol throughout the music so that we know when to change from playing natural position to one of the extended techniques. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, go ahead with your.
Okay. There's also, you can knock on the harp. You can use it. I mean, technically, it's a percussive instrument. You know, we're not bowing like a violin or a cello, so technically it's percussive. And the great thing about the harp is the soundboard can give you some really cool texture, like the Sara Harp Concerto you can listen to hear knocking effects, but you can, and you can request that the harpist use different parts of their hand. So you get a different sound if you use your knuckles than if you use use your entire hand, or if you use 1 or 2 fingers, or really whatever part of the hand that you want to use. What else? Oh, okay. So we have like a gong effect also, which is when you just like smack the strings at the lower part of the harp, which can be fun and cool. There are enharmonic trills. So because we have these pedals, we're actually able to make 2 notes sound as the same note. So for example, if I have B sharp and C natural, both of the notes sound the same. So you can have a trill on those 2 notes. And it also allows for really cool blisses. Like you can do a bunch of, what is it called? Just like all this enharmonic stuff. Oh. With the B flat. So if you break that down, you hear, which is 8 notes, but only 4 pitches, 5 pitches, 4 pitches. Yeah, does anyone have any questions about that? No? Okay. And the last one that I thought was cool and also used quite often is the thunder strike. And to create a thunder strike, you take 1 finger or a few fingers and you just play the crap out of the bottom strings or whatever group of strings you want. It will usually be notated over an octave. But it's definitely most effective in the lower register of the harp because the wire strings kind of clank together and they resonate really, really well. So
would that just be words saying thunderstrike, or like you said, something in the glossary at the beginning, or?
it could be both. It's dependent on what the composer wants to do. I've seen it both ways. So there is definitely a notation for it. I'm bad and I don't think I know what it looks like, but it exists. So that is probably in, I don't know, I go back and forth. I like having things written at the beginning, just so that I personally can have, before I even start the piece, I go through and I look and see, okay, what am I dealing with here? What are these extended techniques? But it also, I mean, it does work to just write in the piece thunderstrike, but I'm going back and forth here, but I think that to have symbols at the beginning of the piece and then write them in throughout is most helpful.
There's a question there from Procor about the half pedal buzz.
Oh yeah. Let me see. So what you do is you take the pedal and you have to find the like sweet spot right in between the 2 gears where the gear at the top I was telling you about is like just slightly touching the string so that it's, you know, the string is bouncing off of the metal gears at the top of the harp, and that's what creates that sound. It's usually, I think it's only ever used in the lower register, which means the G5 down, so all of the wire strings are where you would use this effect. Because I don't think it even works. I mean, yeah, I mean it works up there, but it sounds weird. I've only ever seen it at in the lower register of the harp.
You guys have other questions about the extended technique? I have another subject area that I want her to talk about, but this is really for you, not for me. So go right ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. I know that harp is a diatonic instrument, but have you ever seen microchromatic music, microtonal music, like to tune harp in a special way?
Yes, it does exist. I played a piece called Surround, which is really awesome. If you guys can find it online, you should look it up. It was written for 6 harps placed around a room. And it was just a bunch of really cool effects, like different trill patterns, moving around the circle of harpists. But anyway, off topic. Yes, you can request to have the strings tuned up or down, quarter tone, half tone, whatever you would like. I have never personally done it, but I know that it is a thing that exists.
Yeah, it's interesting because then you're stuck with that quarter tone and the related ones for the whole piece then, right? Or
Exactly.
yeah.
So it's one of those things where if you want it to be there, the whole piece, knock yourself out. But if you don't, then you have to find a way around it, because unfortunately we can't tune accurately while we're playing.
Sounds like there's a harp joke in there about quarter tones, but I think I won't be the one to make it. Okay. So yeah, something that I was wondering if you could talk about. So I have learned over my many years of being an orchestral player, you know, violinists are supposed to practice ahead of time, and I was always a nerd, and I always did, but I know a lot of my colleagues didn't, and you could go into the first orchestra rehearsal, and you could sight read as a violinist, for better or for worse, depending how good you are. And I discovered early on that harpists are in a completely different boat, and they need the music for a pretty long time in advance of an orchestra rehearsal or chamber music rehearsal. And there are 2 reasons that I can think of, but I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for bringing this up. So the first reason that we need music ahead of time is just to put in the pedal markings. So what I mean by that, I have music here. Let's see if you can, I'm gonna find a good, nice pedally spot. So whenever we have an accidental, we have to change a pedal. So we have to go through and write in. Can you guys see in red how I've written like G flat, F flat, D flat, all this stuff? Cool. So that tells me when I have to move my feet. Simple stuff we can sight read with pedals. If it's, you know, a simple change to G major and I just have to put down one pedal, then it's fine. But that is one of the reasons why we need music ahead of time. The other reason is to put in our own fingerings. So often we are not just worried about one note at a time. We're worried about the notes that are coming ahead, that we're going to play soon. So we have to make sure that our hands, can just grab all the notes before we even have to play them. We're always thinking ahead. And I know that everyone is always thinking ahead, but the combination of hands and feet makes sight reading well difficult. So fun times with the harp. Lots of stuff going on.
I actually was thinking of one other thing too, which I think is probably right, which is that when you're playing in an orchestra, of course, you actually, believe it or not, conductors are supposed to be watching the conductors. And I know from sitting next to the undergraduate harp year in and year out, the times change, but a freshman harpist is always going to be in the same situation. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that harpists get very used to looking at their fingers, and therefore it's a kind of a special technique to learn to get your hands in the right place but keep looking back at the conductor, much more so than any other instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Yeah, no, I agree with that totally. I think for the most part, if something is really complicated, we're just going to memorize it and then look at the conductor.
But you see, that's so different from all the other instruments right there, that you would actually memorize it in order to even be able to play it. Yeah,
for sure. The harp, I feel like, is mostly it's either accompanying a solo line for the most part, or it's completely on its own. Like, we have no section, we have nobody to fall back onto unless the stars align and we actually have another harpist in with us. So yeah, I mean, we need to prepare more with the recording, I think, than a lot of other instrumentalists. At least I do. I don't feel comfortable going into rehearsals, especially if it's like a massive piece, without having played through with a recording several times. And I will also practice like looking ahead of me, not looking at my music and not looking at my hands if I know it's an important cue. And yeah, to bring it back to freshman harpists, I mean, it's a completely different skill. If you didn't have a lot of orchestral experience when you're in high school, which a lot of harpists don't, I know I didn't have much, it's totally frightening showing up to orchestra and then having to play with all of these other people and all of these other sounds and still focus on what you have to play yourself. So having the music ahead of time is greatly helpful.
Sara, is there anything that you would say to all these young conductors? Yeah, just, either to be nice to you in the first rehearsal or something about cueing, or I don't know, anything. Yeah.
Sure. My pet peeve is when conductors move too fast from one section to the next. So when harpists start, say we're halfway in the piece and then you say, okay, let's start 15 measures before that. And if you don't give us enough time to start, our pedals will not be in the place that they need to be. So I am always like so happy when a conductor just gives us a minute so we can turn one of our 52 pages and put our pedals where they need to be before we start. But I don't know. Anything else for conductors? I mean, clear downbeat is nice.
That was kind of my question. Like, are there things that like you see us as conductors, like we kind of tend to neglect? Because I know like the pedal changing, changing pedals essential and necessary. But like, are there other things that like we fail to probably like we don't tend to think about that we should? I mean, I guess aside from that.
I don't think so. I think that's the big one. And I guess something else is just knowing how loud a harp can play. So if you're conducting Don Juan and you get to this section where there are a ton of arpeggios. I mean, like running arpeggios for like 15 or 20 measures. And there's also other instruments playing at the same time. If you can't hear us, definitely ask us to play louder, but know that there is a limit to the volume that we can produce when there's like a tutti section or something like that. And if you want the harp to come out and the harpist is playing as loud as they possibly can, that the rest of the orchestra would have to come down in terms of volume in order for the harp to be heard. So that and the pedals is really the big thing though. Just, we're trying. There's just a lot of pedals all the time.
Hi, Sarah. I have a silly question that I wonder if you have a lot of 16th notes. If a conductor asks you to play faster, I wonder what is the limit that the 16 notes can be played on harp?
That's a good question. It depends. If you have 16th notes, say only in the right hand, it's going to limit the speed. If you have a passage of 16th notes where you can break it up into two hands, you can move much faster. So if you have, let's see, if you want something to be really fast and notey, it's helpful to have, to make sure that both hands are able to chime into the phrase so that all the notes can be played. I mean, there are definitely times that I've been given new music and they'll have, somebody will write some crazy running passage in both hands, and most of the time we'll just take out one of the hands because it's completely impossible. So that's a really great question. I think it's important to keep that in mind if you want all the notes to be played.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
First, thank you so much for having the video shot beforehand and for doing this for all of us. It's very much appreciated. I'm really curious, in watching your video that you had posted before, you're saying that the harp is written kind of in like as a piano would be, with both like treble and bass clef. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So one thing I was curious about is, can a harpist play like a bass line in the left hand and then have something like, can a harpist play polyrhythms, or is it like if the left hand's doing one thing then the right hand will also be doing it? Or
Oh yeah, we can playing 2-against-3 is like a major thing for us, especially in French music. You should listen to the Debussy dances. Like halfway through the second dance, there's a section called the Dream Page, which is like our cadenza, and it's all 3-against-2. So we can handle different rhythms in different hands. It's not fun.
no.
But it sounds cool, and we can do it if we work on it.
Is there any chance you'd be willing to play something in the lower register, and then, because it's your what is it? It's your left hand. No, I'm trying to like reposition.
You're right.
Left hand's doing the low stuff, right is doing the high, so it's the same as kind of like piano. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Could I hear you play something that would be doing something like that, or?
Oh God, let's see. Trying to think of what I have worked up. Do you want like running stuff, or gosh, how can I play both? Sorry, I'm looking through the.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I mean,
You're fine. You just want to see like how, like, do you want to see the range, how far we can play, like how far apart we can play?
Yeah, that would be helpful too. Like how far you, yeah,
we can stretch from the bottom of the harp in the left hand and play the right hand at the same time. Sorry, my harp's super out of tune. I just changed like 30 strings.
Oof.
So yeah, we can play. That's actually a C chord.
Oh, that's
At
so
the
good.
same time.
So okay, sorry. I have one more question. Is in the low register, I don't know if it's just the video quality, but it sounded like is the lowest string hard to like have accented, or yeah, okay. So it kind of just resonates, and there's not a lot you can do about that.
Big time. I suggest if you want something to come through in the lower register, you can always double the note. So just create an octave. So there are so many pieces that call for this low C and this low D. And it's not heard well. So it's really smart to double it with an octave.
Gotcha.
So yeah, instead of you get, what am I, C flat? Yeah, you're definitely going to get more sound if you have 2 notes.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Sarah. You mentioned that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Oh. Okay, who's first?
No, you go ahead, man.
Oh, okay, thank you. You mentioned harpists sometimes use recordings to practice before they're coming to a rehearsal. If we are doing a new piece, not premiering it, but if we somehow have a recording and we have a new harpist, it's a very helpful that we send a recording link to the harpist, and so he or she can have practice with it before the rehearsal. You think that would be very helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Even if it's like what is it called? I'm so bad at technology. When you have like the orchestra, like you have it played through what is it, like Sibelius?
Oh, the MIDI kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what it is. Sorry.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's not totally necessary. We can figure it out. Like we can count. But it's always, it's always really helpful just to have some kind of context.
Yes. I know Lang learned to play concertos with recordings. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Oh, sorry, my dog is here. He just came.
What was it? The my question was for like how when you notate chords on a harp, is it similar to notating chords on a piano, or like how many notes at once can you play? You know, like within like a within reason. You know, without like having to expect the Rachmaninoff of harpists to show up or something. You know?
I would say you're always safe with 8 notes. 8 notes is always safe. Depending on the intervals of each chord. So about the furthest I can stretch my 4th finger, which is my lowest finger, to my thumb in the left hand is probably comfortably like a 10th is about as far as I can go. And in the right hand, maybe a little bit further. So if you can fit a chord into that interval range, and you have 8 notes, so 4 on the left and 4 on the right, you should be good. But it is possible. I think I went over this in the video. There, you can cross your hands over for a chord. So if you want an even bigger chord, we can use both hands and cross over. It just can't be like one after the other, after the other, after the other. But yeah, 8, you're safe. All harpists can play 8 notes at one time.
Perfect. Okay, so it's very similar to the piano then with chords.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Sarah, you just called that a chord, and I noticed that in the video, and I would have called it either a broken chord or an arpeggio. So I'm curious how much of the decision is yours, or how each composer works in terms of whether you're going to play all the fingers at once or roll it like that.
Well, I mean, it depends on the way it's notated. So wait, what's the question? I'm sorry, Erica.
Well, I know that now, I didn't know it before, but I know now that you could have 8 fingers at the same time and you could play all the notes together. I would consider that to be a chord. You may make the stylistic choice to roll the chord. I don't know if it's called on harp. Now, clearly, if you have more than 8 notes, then you have to roll it because you can't pluck them at once. But there must be many times where it's not clear from a composer whether you should roll it or play them all. So how is that notated or described? And does it vary from composer to composer?
Absolutely. I think sometimes harpists will use their ear to decide if a chord should be rolled or flat. Generally, chords are rolled. But if you want to notate that a chord is rolled, you draw like a squiggly line next to it. And if you want it to be flat, you draw like a bracket next to it like that. And I always think it's great when composers notate how they want the chords played. If they have something in mind, they should write it down, and then of course you can work with a harpist and see really what sounds best. But that's how you notate that. And yeah, you cannot play a blocked chord of more than 8 notes unless you have a friend that is going to play the rest of the notes.
Right, yeah. Okay, so then like I'm just thinking about all the excerpts that I've heard you play. So the Bartok Concerto for Orchestra, you're rolling that. He doesn't necessarily write that, but that's just what you guys always do. But the Stravinsky, did he show that it was flat?
No, I don't think so. The bar talk is a lot of it is just like performance practice, and just like what we've learned from our teachers. But I know that people have been asked. Sarah Cutler was asked to play those chords blocked, and
I bet by the president of Bard.
huh?
I bet by the president of Bard College. I bet that's who asked her, but maybe not.
Maybe not. I'll have to ask her.
No, I'd be very interested in, yeah. Huh.
Yeah. I'll have to ask her who it was, because she brings it every time I play it. She's like, I had to play these blocked. I'm like, that's awful. Sounds so bad. So yeah, it is where I see notated chords as rolled or flat the most is in French music. And I think that that's because French composers really understand the harp. It's a huge part of, really became a huge part of music in the 1900s. Well, like early 1900s, when this model harp was created. So I think it was until like 1917 or something like that, early 1900s, the harp had 7 pedals, but they didn't have 3 gears. So the harp could not play every note on just like every note, period. It couldn't do it. So when this harp, which is called a double action harp, was invented, okay, wait, let me back up. Little tiny harp history. So in the early 1900s, 2 people were asked to create 2 new harps that could play chromatic passages. So this harp was created, and another harp was created called the cross-strung harp. So it had 2 rows of strings literally crisscrossing each other with 2 columns on each side. And when these harps were created, they had Debussy and Ravel. They commissioned Debussy and Ravel to each write a piece. So Ravel wrote Introduction and Allegro for this harp, and Debussy wrote the dances for the cross-strung harp. So I totally forget where I was going with this, but I got carried away. Was there a question? I'm sorry.
Oh my God, what was the question?
I don't know. I forgot. You guys really shouldn't have chosen me to do this. I can really ramble for a long time. Sorry.
Here's a little piece of trivia. Which kind of harp does Harpo Marx play in the movies? Do you know?
Harpo Marx was around for the double action harp. I think he was like the beginning of the double action harp. Maybe the single action, but I don't think so.
Okay.
He's a man though.
This is kind of on the same lines as a history question, I guess. I was wondering why most harpists are women and how that came about.
Well, a lot of harpists are women, but the 2 harpists that really defined 2 major techniques were men, Carlos Salcedo and Marcel Grangeny. I think that it's, the harp is viewed as a delicate, angelic instrument, which it totally can be. But we can do some pretty cool stuff, some pretty weird stuff. And this instrument really holds its own. It's a tank, and it can produce a whole lot of sound. So I don't know why there are so many female harpists, but your male harpists are out there, and they're good. So don't count them out. The principal harpist of the Met is a man. Actually, he just won LA Phil, so he's leaving to go do that now. He's French, of course. He's amazing. So, yeah. I don't know why.
Sarah, as you know, I am very close friends with, actually, it's Marcel Grangeon's last student or the youngest student.
Yep.
And I used to hear a lot about the two different styles. It was almost like rooting for a baseball team, but these days, are there still seriously two different camps and styles?
Yeah, for sure. There are people that have completely different techniques. But it's less of a battle now. I know a lot of harpists, including myself, are kind of hybrid players where I've studied with really French teachers that studied with Grangeny, and also Salzedo players at the same time. But yeah, it's not as intense of a feud as it used to be, but harpists just have different techniques. I mean, there are different techniques in Russia, but the two, I think, main techniques in the States are the technique created by Grangeny and the technique created by Carlos Salcedo. So just very different ways of holding your hands and your arms and how you move up and down the harp and where you put the weight. Just very different technically. But both sound amazing.
Other questions?
What's traveling like?
What's traveling like with this thing?
Mm-hmm.
It's a journey. I mean, I've got it down now to a science. You put covers. Usually you have 3 different covers. You have a cover for the base of the harp, a cover to protect the column, and then a giant cover that looks like a huge Arby's glove that you put on top. And then there's a dolly that you put like the dolly under the harp, strap the dolly around the harp, and then you're on your way. Now I have in the back of my car, I have a Subaru Forester. I put the seats all the way down. I have a futon mattress in there, and I leave the harp on the car, and then I pick it up and just kind of like push it in there. So it's not the most fun thing, but we can get where we need to go, as long as there aren't too many stairs.
That was a considerate question, Glenn.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
About Sarah. Is this last call like in a pub? We want one more?
Hi.
Oh,
yeah.
last thing. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
All good, dude. All right, thanks. So I had a question about maybe it's a pedal question. I still don't quite understand the pedals, but say I'm trying to get like a B to a B flat trill. Is that not possible on the harp because of the pedals? Or yeah, how do you said that it's hard to do things dramatically on the harp, right?
Yeah. So
Is
B,
it possible or
let me see. Yeah, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
You would have to find the enharmonic equivalent. So I know that we have, yeah, B natural and C flat is fine. Yeah, it works. So what you would do is you would notate like B natural and C flat trill, and then when you change, you would have to the B flat, you just mark an A sharp, and then I can just move the B pedal from B natural to B flat. So it's possible. It's one of those things where you really just have to like understand how the enharmonics work.
Mhm.
If I had to change 2 pedals at the same time with the trill, no, scratch what I was going to say. Yes, you can do it. And it will sound okay. It will sound like this.
okay. Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Pro chords being shy. Harmonics?
Yes. What about harmonics? We can play them with the left hand, we can play them with the right hand, we can play 2 in the left hand is about, I think, the most that you can do comfortably. So you can play like chords with 2 notated in the left hand and 1 in the right hand. But I think 3 notes at the same time work. Oh, one thing to note, with the harmonics in the left hand, so the way that we play is we're using our thumb, our second finger, and this part of our hand to push against the string to dampen it. So we can't play like, let's see, probably more than a fourth in the left hand, 2 harmonics at the same time. Once you get further than that, it's really difficult to place the part of your hand that needs to be placed on both of the strings because it needs to touch both of the strings.
Have you tried bowing the strings? Like with a violin bow or double bass bow?
What was that?
Have you tried using bow on a string? Violin bow.
A violin bow or a bass bow?
Oh, no, but I've seen it done. It's kind of weird. You can do it on the wire strings, but it's kind of difficult, I think. I've seen someone do it on like the lowest string, but it's once you get into the harp, there's not really that much space in between the strings. It's like what, like half an inch in between, maybe. So a bow wouldn't really fit easily unless you like crank a string back and hold it and then put the bow through, but I don't think that's so efficient. But I mean, you can treat it like prepared piano and request that things get clipped onto the strings. I've had someone ask me to put like clothes hangers on the strings and it creates a really weird effect. Again, like with the weaving of the paper, what other stuff you can do? Yeah, you can like attach things to the strings as long as it's not going to damage the harp.
I'm just curious, are the strings expensive?
Yes, they're very expensive. The wire strings are the most expensive. If you order a set, it's probably like a full set around like $600, something like that. So yeah, it's an expensive instrument. But we have to keep up with them, change wire strings like once a year, maybe once every 2 years maximum, because they become dead sounding after a while. And the strings will get pitted like from the gears that change the pitch when you, from the repetitive motion of having them knock into the strings, you'll get like a little pit in the string, and then you know that you need to change it because it could be affecting the way that the string holds its natural pitch. So yeah.
Three, two, one. Any questions? All right. Thank you so very much, Sarah. This is really incredibly generous of you. If you want to send that chart of extended techniques or whatever, I could pass it on to everybody. And I don't want to make a lot more work for Sarah, but I expect that she meant it, that she would be happy to talk to you guys some more if you were writing your own piece or something like that.
Yeah,
Thank you, Sara Magill, and thank you all for being part of our first Instrument Menagerie.
Yay. Thank you for having me.
Full pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.